Welcome to Sacred Conversations, a place where Dr. Nicole Dolan and I, Robin Bethel, along with a myriad of guests, explore some of the sacred threads and wholeness of life, held within the light and within the dark, held within the immensity. Thank you for being with us. In this episode, Nicole and I look at some of the ideas we're often touching on within conversations to see more of what's behind them. We attempt to share wavy, imprecise pieces of how we hold and think of wholeness, and we also talk of varying paths of healing and transformation, namely journeys that center on doing intentional inner work, sometimes within a structured container, and less structured journeys that are more about opening deeply into the life that meets us, and as part of that, fully feeling all that is ours to feel. A personal side note, in listening back to this conversation, I noticed I didn't use language around feeling very often when I talked of being with life and opening into it. I think because for me, feeling all the things is so automatically bound up in the idea of opening into life. But it's worth noting here more clearly because feeling our emotions, however wild, stormy, difficult, at whatever depth we have capacity within our body to do so and not be entirely overwhelmed and shut down, is at the foundation of what I mean by opening into life. It's an intrinsic piece of the alchemy, so please carry that forward with you into the episode. In this conversation, we talk about complex things, and sometimes Nicole and I fail to always express our thoughts as clearly as we might have hoped. It's a bit messy in ways, and yet also, especially with the joys of editing and cutting, I love it too, and we hope you enjoy. Today, we're here in conversation again with each other, Nicole and I, and we're just going to talk about some things that met me in the week since we gathered last and just see where it takes us. So I was thinking after our first conversation together, I've had a lot of thoughts come to me after that where I thought, oh, I do know how I would answer that once I was more still, and slow, or I would think about a line that you said and I would think about, oh, I would want to talk about that more, in this direction. So I feel like those things have just been meeting me. And one thing that has met me is that we talk about wholeness a lot. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about what that meant to us when we talk about wholeness as a way to begin, and kind of like the felt sense of wholeness and the language, like the shape of wholeness, how we hold it and speak about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to begin by sharing a really imprecise story of how I kind of feel into that. It's not like exciting or mind blowing. It's just when I talk about wholeness, I feel like for me, I feel it as like a wholeness of soul and self, but also the wholeness of all of our shared stories and how we all are together here in this world. And I feel that the reason I can feel like everything belongs, that like everything fits into the whole, that I can trust the unfolding, whether it brings me suffering or not. Like there's the level of the individual soul path, but then there's also just all of our shared story. And I feel like I feel into it. Again, this is not like I'm trying to create a Bible story or anything, but I feel like God, all love, the emptiness and the fullness, the consciousness, the love, the divine masculine, divine feminine. In essence, something like God like shattered into these infinite pieces. And, a piece of that divine is in every being. And everything unfolding in life is just the one way that it could be to bring in each piece of God then is imbued with its own awareness and seeing, and the choice to be love and like to choose love and all of that, and that we're making our way back where every single piece of God and every single being, like, will all choose to be, whatever that means. I don't know where you have to get to for that to happen, but like you're together in love. And so for me, so I can trust the wholeness because whatever is happening, whether I can feel the wholeness in my own life, it's just, I believe it's this divine unraveling and raveling that will, it's like if I split myself into this exact assortment in this one particular way, like there's going to be a lot that's painful and horrible, but like this one way will create the circumstances needed for every piece to be alive with their own awareness and like all come back together. And so that's why I feel like I can trust in it because I just believe this whole unfolding story.
Mhm. I mean, when you say that, it feels like if I had to put language to it, I would say it feels like you're speaking about the tapestry of the universe, right?
Yes, I think about like fabric often actually.
That's the image that I see when you share that, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful that you have that trust. That was the other word that was coming through when you were talking is trust. So, I mean, you're speaking about this tapestry, this meaningfulness, right, in all things, chaos in order, order in chaos, trauma in transformation, transformation through trauma. I mean, I can think of light and dark in so many different ways, and that's really the image that I'm holding for you as you're speaking about that is like, yeah, it feels like you're trying to define maybe the idea of like the tapestry of the universe, which is a rather difficult thing to put into words. And I think you're doing that well. And there's so much in that that's, of course, mystery too. But yeah, but the other word that was real loud as you were speaking was trust, right? You have a deep sense of trust in all things.
Yeah. Yeah, how do you hold wholeness? And also I feel like I feel as I was talking about it, I could feel the inadequacy of what I was saying. Like I could feel like I don't feel like I'm explaining this as well as I've explained it in my journal or even to someone else. I'm like, I feel I'm not doing this very well, but for whatever it's worth, there's
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guess just there's my very imperfect sense of how I hold it. But
I can
like,
appreciate something about that anyways. I think when you're first off, when you're trying to explain something like that or even speak to it, it's very challenging, you know? It's so complex and more than we even understand. So I give you grace there, you know? And then also I just feel like, it's a wide concept to step right into, which is okay, right? But I feel like if anything, I see you as, like, modeling, you know, how you can take a step into that space because it's not easy, right? So, how do I hold wholeness? Just like, um well, just like we're speaking about here, I think that it's an extraordinarily difficult question. Yeah, I think for me, if I had to say, how do I hold wholeness? When I first came into connection with you, I had come, right, with this book that I was writing and this story of like, I want to talk about meaning in all things. And I think still that's how I would describe that I hold it overall, but I would say through my own healing work and journeys, wholeness for me is not only trust in the wider picture and trusting like you're speaking about that we have our individual stories and that we're part of a collective story as well and that each of those pieces those fragments right that makes our own picture a whole also does that as a collective in the universal picture. So there's a lot of trust that goes into that, right? It gives us a space to hold us through really dark and difficult things. Um, it gives us purpose and meaning. So I think I would still hold it in that way where I say that for me, wholeness is in trust and in trusting the process and trusting that there is meaning in all things. But another aspect of wholeness that comes through to me now, especially after being a mother, mothering was a role in my life, is a role in my life that has brought me into great paradox with light and dark and the aspects of wholeness. And something that stands out to me or that is speaking to me when I think of holding wholeness now that is newer for me to understand about myself, and I'm sure is helpful to others too, is my capacity to hold even in, like, the mundane, because we're talking about I feel like when we're talking about the tapestry of the universe, we're like, "Well, how do you hold the light and the dark and, like, those difficult moments of surrender and suffering," and while that's all true, it's like, how do you also apply that to, like, the mundane, and what does that look like in our daily lives? And for me, I would say wholeness now also in my mundane world. Sometimes my world's mundane and sometimes it's not. Um, but in the ordinary, I would say it's also the capacity to hold difficult moments such as tantrums or spilt milk or, um, a soccer game that didn't go the way we wanted it to, whatever it is, right? With an ability to almost like a nervous system ability to hold difficult moments as well as bright moments as both. And I don't know if I'm explaining that well, so I'm gonna use an image that just came through to me, and it's like, think of Instagram, right? It's like we all know, I'm not gonna be the first to say this, that, like, Instagram posts all the pretty pictures of ourselves and the wonderful moments of our lives as perfection, and that's what people see, and so people are triggered by that, feeling like they need to compare and live up to this one way of being. But the image that I really hold with that, or the reason I hold that is like the image of perfectionism. I think it's one that we can all identify with. We all understand that concept through that image. Is it's causing so much pain, and this isn't meant to be like about Instagram, but social media in general. But this idea that we are meant to live these perfect lives, this idea that we are meant to be these perfect beings has I know even just as a mother has made the world a lot harder for me, right? When I feel like things shouldn't be going wrong. There shouldn't be something that's out of place or this loud or this chaotic or this messy or, and so for me, I'm really speaking to wholeness, we're holding it at the level of like the tapestry of the universe. And then I'm also like bringing it down to the microcosm of like, and in the family unit or in our home lives, whatever that looks like. I think that we have almost lost the capacity to hold wholeness, even in smaller moments, if that makes sense.
I like that you mentioned that because it makes me think of how I think of life like as poem. And the
Mhm.
reason why it feels that way to me is because I feel like a poem is just like a repository for all the things.
Yeah.
There's this one poem that's about that I can't remember the exact lines, but it's like, you know, a poem has space for like the sour milk in the refrigerator and like the transcendent moment with your lover and all of these things. And so to me, when I think of things as poem that are way beyond words on a page, it's like the suspension of like every different texture all together um, in attention and not like attention in a negative sense, but like the tension of suspension of like all existing in their unbalanced balance, and that to me feels like poem. So like life in that way, like it holds all these things. It's all the things.
Yes.
Mm.
I had a dear friend recently. We both actually went on vacation at the same time, which doesn't usually happen for either of us.
Mm.
And we weren't together, but she had gone one way and I'd gone the other. And so I was texting her about something when I got back. And anyways, just checking in with each other, "How was your trip?" or whatever, and she says to me, she was like, "Oh, it's been wonderful, except for there's been a couple snags." And the couple snags, mind you, were like one of the children was sick the entire time,
Oh,
and
uh-huh.
the other one broke his wrist snowboarding.
Oh.
I was like, and then this is like a trip to Tahoe for her, and I just kinda sat with it because 'cause I'm like, yeah, I was like, my family and I just got back from a trip where, there were moments that were really challenging, whether it was, I've shared that we deal with autism, so we deal with meltdowns and, or ADHD behavior where it's like, I'm chasing a kid in the airport and everybody's looking at me like I'm just a terrible mother, whatever it is, right? Like, just the really stressful moments of life. There's a time where those moments would have completely clouded or covered. I'm seeing the image of like the world going gray, right? Like the world would just go gray. Like the moment that may have lasted 15 minutes used to be an entire day or maybe even an entire vacation that went wrong. Like it just used to stretch. And I'm not saying like the episode used to actually stretch, which they did that too, but I mean it more like in my body, in my nervous system, at the level of like my somatic wellness. If something went wrong, it was then wrong for a very long period of time. Like I like coded it, right? You've seen what is that Disney Inside Out,
I
right?
haven't.
Oh gosh, you haven't seen.
I've
Okay.
heard
Well,
of it.
scene where or lots of scenes, I think they go over this, but, basically, like, these little characters are trying to keep, these positive memories alive, and they work in the brain, and so when the memories come in, you can see the memory in a little crystal that looks like a marble, and it's this beautiful memory. And whenever sadness comes over and touches the memory, it turns gray, like, it shuts it is the color, it then stores it in a different part of the brain. And so it's, really sharing in the beginning. And of course, this changes. You see the transformation through the story that in the end, we need sadness. But in the beginning of the movie, you see that sadness is a problem, right? Sadness is taking up, like, as soon as that memory is tainted, then forget it. It's all bad. So I would say that was my experience in the past and being able to hold wholeness at the level of nervous system is I guess if I wanted to not try to be too confusing, what I'm really seeing here, what we're talking about is there once was a time where I held wholeness spiritually and through the light of like, yes, everything's meaningful. These really difficult things have happened, but beautiful things have come from this. Wonderful, right? And now, while that's still true, I've now had more of an experience where we're talking about it in the right now, in our daily experiences, where wholeness is held in the nervous system, in the body. It's part of our healing journey to be able to hold wholeness. So to go back to that story with my friend, it was funny because I get this text from her, "Oh, it's been wonderful, but, these were the little snafus that happened." And I kinda giggled to myself, she's a little bit more evolved than me sometimes, and I'm like, "Wow, she's so incredible." And then I look at myself and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting," because I had an experience like that too, where there would have been moments, there were moments on our trip where my husband looked at me and he's like, "This is so hard," you know? And I'm like, "Yeah, but I don't wanna code it that way." Like, I'm, like, really working to hold both, right? So for us, even if the baby is up all night, like, the next day, I don't want it to take, that memory and turn it into gray. So, anyway, I hope I'm explaining that well, but but I'm really speaking to both of those pieces, and I know in my own life, I'm in kind of the paradox of that, really learning to hold that deep spiritual component and complexity, and then also be able to really apply that to, well, what does that look like, today?
Since we don't want.
Yeah. Yeah. Tiny moments we don't want, right?
Right, right, and to, like, accept them within the whole. Yeah. I feel like usually I am pretty accepting of the unfolding moments, but I did share that story with you where I was completely opposite just in the last week. When it came down to orchestrations of a soccer team, coming together and thinking that something that felt really crucial might not be. And and another friend said something. She was like, well, it's out of our control for a while, and I was like, no, but it can only be this way or this way.
Yeah.
So it took me a while to settle in. You were talking about, within different moments, holding the light and the dark and holding just, everything all together and not letting one thing make it everything. And I feel like, I don't know if this ties in super well, but I feel like this for me is kind of that sense of like inner alchemy, just like allowing everything that rises in my experience and everything that needs to be felt, whether it's light or dark, um, to just be with it. And that's what then like it layers in as beauty. It's almost like I would never use this word usually, but just because you said it, it's almost like then it over time, like it codes as beauty. I don't know. I don't know. That sounds strange to me to say, but just like by letting everything, that full range exist, everything does transmute into beauty. It finds its form within you. It's like we also say integrate a lot, right? Like to me, integration is kind of just like allowing all the things with all the jagged edges or whatnot, or the light or the dark, just giving them the space to like settle into the crevices of your being and like find its exact form within your own wholeness,
Mm,
and then you can feel it. And so it's just like by like allowing and just letting it be and accepting that, I feel like everything does find its way eventually into the felt feeling of wholeness. And it does then, to me, it feels like beauty. And beauty is not like positive easy. It's like that, and it's meaning from hard things, and but yeah, it almost just like allowing everything to exist gives it like the grace to then like melt into the wholeness. Uh,
yeah. It's a really, once again, challenging complexity to try and explain, but I'm right here with you. Like I hear you and I'm like, yes, I get that. And um it's reminding me of, well, very much the heroine's journey, right? Which we talked about, which is different than the hero's journey because the hero's journey is very linear. There's a path, there's a way. So, when we think of the big one that people like to kind of look at this through the lens of is like Star Wars or Karate Kid. Think of the themes in those films where you have an ordinary person and he's being called to go into the unknown and he's refusing that call at first and then eventually accepts that call, and when he does, he's met by the mentor, right? So we've heard the saying before that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And for those of us who have had that experience, it's pretty profound. It's pretty beautiful to like see how that mentor like showed right up into your life and wound up supporting you in those ways. And then, they take you into the unknown. They prepare you for battle. They take you into the unknown, or they kind of like stand there and watch you, right? Like they're guarding you and guiding you from afar while you're going into the unknown. And then there's, the battles that you go through and you come back through. So the hero's journey, in my work, a lot of things that I've spoken about and written about and taught about, um, I use obviously as a psychologist, a therapist through the lens of trauma and healing trauma. So say that there's a significant event that's happened in your life and you've decided that at this point in time to face that, whether it's been, you know, by choice. It's not always, I don't know. How do I want to say? I want to say like most people don't necessarily consciously make that choice, but that's not, I don't think I want to get into that. That's not necessarily true, or I don't want to overgeneralize it. But when somebody decides, because of whatever's happening in their life, to go on that healing journey and they know what it is that they are trying to heal, right? Or they have an idea, like they're aware, they remember something from their past, or they know something that's like triggering them, or um their dear friend has asked them to like go and look at this, do this work, whatever it is. They embark on this hero's journey, right? They have a therapist that shows up, a mentor, a guide, and they go on this path together. But the heroine's journey is very different. It's so much harder to explain. And but that journey is about what you're talking about, where it's like it's about, and I'm looking for the language of it, but it's like the journey is the message is that what you're looking for is not out there. It's not clear. It's not something where it's like, once again, through a therapist lens of like, oh, we need to alleviate the symptoms around this trauma so that we can bring relief to PTSD, right? It's not that. It's more, often don't know what it is that's like really paining us, or why we're so triggered, or maybe we're not so triggered and we're just holding the beauty of that journey as we take steps in a spiral that we don't necessarily know that we are in.
That's so nice you brought that up because I was not even, segging into that, but you knew that I have this thing on my mind, and I feel like you opened it up there, um, which is, again, I guess I would tie this to wholeness with the sense that like everything belongs. And we have these more masculine journeys that are more action oriented and more maybe like result oriented. And then we have these more feminine journeys that bring in more of the yin, and more of the surrender. And they all belong. They're all within the wholeness of our evolution as people, but it's something that I talked about with you before we started recording that at some point I wanted to touch on this because I feel like I respect that journey of like seeking the mentor and doing the work to arrive at places of inner transformation, whether it's healing or opening more deeply, into yourself in other ways. But um, I feel most of the people who are talking about inner transformation and inner alchemy that I hear at least, uh, the language is around like doing the work and the work of it. And I do feel like it's important to just note that it doesn't always look that way. Like you can live in a way where you're really present to the intricacy of your experience, and let that take you where it takes you, in a way that has a similar result to maybe more intentional pursuits of transformation, and like they all belong. It doesn't always have to be like a work program that you lay out for yourself. Sometimes maybe it'll look that way, and sometimes it's just opening to life. It's like how much, and what they share is they share doing something really hard, because either way, you have to be present with difficult things. Um, yeah, and so you can kind of pursue that in that way, or if you can be just like really intricately connected to your experience. I feel that when you really do allow that and you're present with it, it does result in this inner alchemy. But at different times, we need different helps and things like that. But
Yeah. I think I'm just so aware of like the things that we are bringing in today, having such layers of complexity that my own mind is kind of like, it takes me a little bit to be able to open up to that vastness. And so I think that's why it's kind of finding our way through as far as like, yeah, where are we landing? And I will say when you're sharing this, it's interesting. And I've shared this before. I'm like, I have my own like little biases with it. Um, Certainly so and I honor that. Like, I wanna honor that I have my own biases with it, and it's not because I know or I'm gonna say, like, I'm right. I'm just holding on to, like I'm like, "Well, it's interesting because I think a person like me, somebody who probably is more of a depressive type, luckily at this stage in my life, I'm not a depressed person, but I'm very aware of the depths. So I would say for somebody like me, that it feels like I had to get there first before it could open up in this other way. Now that said, that also would be indicative of my own trauma history. And when I think of people, well, let me say it this way. The thing that stands out to me the most about that, whenever you share it that way, is we come back to what we had talked about before, which is your deep okayness. Such a sense of deep okayness in the world, like we touched on previously, that it literally is one of your gifts and makes you who you are and makes you, the image that just came through was like the lighthouse. Like you are able to be the lighthouse to so many. And that is your gift, and I think that because you come with that deep okayness, now I'm gonna be a trauma therapist when I speak like this. Most of us are not. Most of us are not in deep okayness, and most of us have to really do work to get there, and so I do think of, and I'm not just and I'm not I don't wanna say or minimize your own work in your life, right? So, but just speaking about it from a place of I'm in my mind, I'm thinking of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Are you familiar with this?
Mm.
Old psychology term.
Yeah.
So, but just like when we have those basic needs met, we have a much easier time getting into those levels of evolution, individuation, asking those deeper questions about life, having the capacity, even on a nervous system level, to hold the deeper layers and to be able to deepen into things as opposed to being in anxiety or depression. So that really comes forth for me where I'm like, I always see it. So when I say my own bias, I always see it this way. And I mentioned this, I think the last time we were talking is, victim, survivor, thriver, meaning like when we're healing through something or we're changing something or we're growing or we're creating transformation, we often we go through this, or not even we often, but it's part of the journey to be the victim, like be the person who's had the experience, whatever that experience has been, and in that space, there's healing, there's work, but there's also like deep compassion and empathy for self that starts to come through. There starts to become more okayness, right? And then we come into this place where we're surviving in the world. And in that surviving place, it's like things are going okay. Like I feel okay. Maybe sometimes I'm worried about the other shoe dropping. Maybe sometimes I'm still dealing with some anxiety or depression or whatever that looks like. But I'm okay mostly. I might just not be thriving, right? And I think when we step into that thriving place, for me, my own personal beliefs, that's where we really start to open up spiritually. We start to awaken, we start to deepen into those spaces where we are able to be in those experiences that you're talking about, right? Where it's like you're able to take experiences that are both micro and macro, like there could be, massive experiences that happen in your life and also smaller experiences. And either way, you're able to hold them with meaning. You're able to give them space and capacity, once again, nervous system regulation and capacity to hold space for them to do their thing. And
Right.
so that's where I really speak to that part of me that comes up and it's like, "Yeah, but, like," and I could be wrong, and I'm totally okay with being wrong, so I wanna put that out there, right? Like, maybe it's just my experience, and maybe it's the people that I've helped throughout my time as a therapist. I may have attracted a certain type of person that aligned with this experience, so but I've always brought that to you. I've always said, like, "Yeah, you do have such a deep okayness, and it hasn't come necessarily from," and forgive me if I'm wrong, but from what I know so far, it hasn't necessarily come from having to do, like, shadow work as much as it's been, like, a part of you, like, a part of your soul is, like, heroine's journey, like, deeply feminine, able to get to that inner self, you know? So and of course, there's gonna be people out there like that too. So I don't know. I guess I'm just holding it in a way of like, yeah, like, can people access can there be people in the world that are able to access those experiences and thread them through and have the capacity to hold and be with them, right, in light and dark, to see them become whatever it is they are becoming? And are there people too that, like myself, it's like we didn't really get to see all the brightness in the world when we lived in layers of trauma. Like we didn't have the capacity in our nervous systems to be able to hold space for something else to happen or to be with something in a deeper way.
Yeah. I don't mean to make this all about like um how I am or whatnot, but I do feel like it has always been as an adult at least, like in my adult way of being after having that really transformative experience in my mid-20s that we talked about last. I'm willing to open. I'm always willing to open and like allow. And I know a lot of nervous system stuff goes into that. With always being safe in the world, I think this is a silly thing to say. I don't know if it matters, but I do feel like that is mostly true. But I also should know it's like there's been a piece of something from childhood that I did have to come back to and really process and integrate that I definitely would consider a trauma, or at least like in the processing is like a secondary one. But I feel like that I was just so insulated from that in childhood that still, if there was, it didn't like, shift. Like for how I had to process it later, it seems like maybe it would have, but it was like so insulated by my daily experience. So I know I recognize the reason that certain things, like I've been able to just always feel all the things because it doesn't usually overwhelm me to the point of like shutting down. And there's a lot that goes into that. But, and I so respect following all the paths that bring healing and growth. And um, for me, being so connected to my inner world has brought that.
Just think for most I wanna say for most people, and yet I'm also really open to, like, yeah, but look at the world that I live in, right? Like, as a psychotherapist, as a depth psychologist, look at the world that I live in. So, I'm also open to maybe not, like, maybe especially in other parts of the world, maybe it's different. But here, I feel like my bias that comes up is like, yeah, but in order for people to be able to do that, in
Yeah.
order for them to be in okayness enough to go into that inner journey and to even open up in that way, sometimes there's a certain level of trauma work that occurs first, and that part is really hard. I resonate with what you're saying, like, so much, and I wanna say that, um, I actually recently had an experience, I started working with, I don't know how much I've told you of this, Robin, but I started working with a prayer practitioner about a year ago, and maybe a little longer now, actually. Anyways, I went to her and I said, it was so funny. We first met and she was like, I don't know how I'm going to help you. Like she was just kind of laughing. She was like, I don't know how I'm going to help you, right? You've done this work, you're this person in the world. Like, I'm not really sure like what I'm going to be able to do for you. And I was like, but that's just it. Like, actually, I was going through a time in my life where I was like, I actually just don't want another professional. And mind you, I have worked with so many beautiful mentors and clinicians and healers and professionals. So I have so much gratitude for that experience. And maybe this is leading to like what we're talking about. At least from my experience, I had to go through a lot before I could get to like the joy in healing, let's say. That's where I'm going. So, my personal experience, which I'm trying not to project onto others, but also holding the ones with me that would have to do trauma layers of work first. So, done a lot of work in my life. So I meet with her and I'm like, "Well, first off," I was like, "I know how to meditate. I'm a deeply spiritual person. I'm a very intuitive person, but I don't really know how to pray, right? I'm not a religious person, so, maybe you can teach me how to pray," is what I said. And, we wound up opening this space together. We wound up having this relationship where we became friends and really, really grateful for it. And over time, like, as we got to know each other, which was also really beautiful, right? Because you don't usually get to know your therapist, right? And, um, but in some ways. But so she opened up her world to me, and it was just what I needed. I wasn't at the point where I needed what I used to. So she opens up her world to me. I'm aware of like, my neurodivergent family and her neurodivergent family and my issues in my marriage and her issues in her marriage and things that are going on at home. And we got to this place where she just I don't even know if I could really explain it well enough, but we just started laughing. Like, we just started laughing. Like, we would tell these stories that used to cause so much pain, like, that were such chaos, such, like, horrific, painful stories, Like, the image that just popped in my head is I remember when I was first a mother and, the moms were all, like, shopping together and kids are, walking around a store with glass everywhere and I'm terrified. I'm like sweating. I'm so stressed out. My daughter's like touching everything. She's screaming if she can't touch everything. Like that was my experience. And that image just popped in. So maybe that's important, maybe it's not. But the point is I was just going through like so many chaotic experiences at the time that were like being read by my nervous system and my body is like threat, 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 right? Just so stressful. And so fast forward a few years, 5, 7 years, so I'm sitting with this prayer practitioner and just we start bringing in these stories to each other, like, she's sharing things about, "Oh, yeah, like, I remember that for me, like, I remember when I would go to the mommy and me circle," and she's like, "And my kid escaped through the doggy door, and we couldn't find him," like so it's just we just wound up in these places where we were, like, laughing so hard over the things that we had been through that had once caused us so much pain. And once again, my bias is gonna come in, yeah, and you can't do that until you do the deeper work, so maybe I need to look at that bias within myself. But I had gotten to a place where it was like I could do that, and I actually literally wrote about and I called it sacred laughter. It wound up being one of the most healing experiences of my life. I remember one time she brought us in so she would meditate before we would meet, and she would, like, feel into whatever it was that she felt would come into our session, and then we would meet, and every time she would share with me, like, "Oh, this is what I meditated about today," and it's so funny because this is what you're talking about, and so we were this
Yeah.
synchronicity, it was really beautiful. And then she, this one time, she goes into prayer, and she makes this Freudian slip, and I forget what it was, but she, like, says something, and she just starts laughing so hard, she's, like, uncontrollable, like, she can't even get her like, we're trying and she's, like, trying to, you know, get back to a more grounded state, I can't think of the word I'm trying to think of right now, but she's trying to, like, come back to herself and, like, you know, stop laughing. and get a hold of herself, I think is what I was thinking of. And she's just not able to, and I'm, like, laughing so hard, and I just look at her and I was like, "You know what? This is, like, everything that I needed today. Like, I don't even need a prayer. This is everything that I needed today." Anyways, there's more to that, but it just wound up being this experience for me that I've had recently where it was like, yeah, like, even these stories that used to cause me so much pain, so much suffering, and I'm not saying that, like, that's what we need to do with our stories right away is go laugh about them. Some of them hurt too much, but it was unique, and I think it speaks to what we're talking about a little bit.
First, I feel like you should tell me more about the prayer practitioner another time, but, um but I feel like it just, to me, like, weaves together. It's like the paths of inner transformation, whether it's, like, doing the work or whether it's opening to life in a way that allows it to metabolize and turn to beauty. I feel like either of those ways are so dependent on, like, we're embedded in this hole with other people. I haven't done therapy or whatnot, but I've encountered people that were immense gift over and over and over, like in large ways, small, like someone that I met shortly before you and I started talking, I spent days with. And they gave me language for something that years later came back into, like, a layer of healing I didn't even know was still there around this childhood experience that brought it in this whole 'nother level of completion. And I spent, like, 2 days with this person, and to me, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, the gifts that he gave me are so extreme," and so it's like either way, like, we have all these gifts from other people, like, you can go see a therapist, like, that's a gift. They're, like, holding a space and guiding you, like, even if you don't, you're still encountering people that drop something into your awareness in that moment that becomes a piece of exactly what you needed, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah,
So
I feel like you have to say even when you're saying that, it does feel like we're really talking about today, one of the main themes that feels like it's really standing out to me is this hero's journey and this heroine's journey. So maybe there's space if we want to open that up more at some point.
yeah.
But it's interesting because it's like even though I'm kind of spinning through, like following threads and weaving and holding, I'm also like really hearing and feeling that like well, even when you go to a therapist, right? Like that is the guide, that is the one mentor. Whereas the heroine's journey is about many healers, friends, people, like the village that comes in and supports, and there's no like one guide. So as we're sharing, it's like, yeah, I just feel like whether we meant to talk about it today or not, it does feel like it's like maybe, as I was saying, like, okay, here's my bias, but I'm open to being wrong. I'm always open to being wrong. Um, as I'm holding it and processing it in real time with you, I'm also saying to myself now, like, well, maybe not always, but often, I would say most often, the journey with therapist is the hero's journey. It is. It's that one person that shows up and prepares you to be able to walk into the unknown. The heroine's journey, that inner journey that you're talking about, is something that I'm gonna contradict myself, but what's coming through is, like, you can't even be prepared for. Like,
Because you're just opening to the life that meets
it's
you.
an opening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I feel like we should return to this, the heroine's journey and the hero's journey next time. Not next time, but sometime.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I agree.
Glad you brought it up because I'm glad that we talked about it, and I hope that, something we evoked a little bit of the shape of wholeness that we feel, however imperfectly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Thank you. It's good to connect
okay.
with you today.
Well, thank you. And that's all for today.
Thank you for being with us today. If you feel called, follow the podcast wherever you listen and connect with us on Instagram or YouTube at sacred.conversations.podcast. And most of all, may you keep opening to yourself, to the mystery, and to the story within you that's still being written.